Hi folks, welcome to another edition of the Omnist Hour. Nice music down. Some of you will recognize as the music from Alfred Hitchcock Presents, which is actually Charles Gounod's music from the ballet Faust, part of it called The Dance of a Dead Marionette, I think. Let's see, what is it called? Funeral March of a Marionette, which I thought was rather appropriate for today's subject. We're going to call this one Lyons and Buggers and Fembots. Oh my! Luciferian and Lilithian bloodlines among current and former chosen species and peoples. Okay, where are we going with that? Well, let's talk about the artwork behind me first. I tried to get the AI art to draw me lions and buggers, and fembots. Not lions and tigers and bears. We're not in Oz anymore. It seemed to be okay with drawing lions. Actually did some interesting things with the lions, like making one a mechanical lion. I thought that was clever. Didn't have so much luck trying to figure out what a bugger looked like, or a fembot, which I thought was interesting, since those are pretty well-known memes in our cultural memory, aren't they? Did find a way to convey some attacks from the sky, so here, and some bots here. I don't know. Middling effort, I would give it. Okay, where are we going today? There are quite a few factions involved in this spiritual battle that we're participating in. And they all have their own agenda. I'm going to give you an idea where all these factions come from and try to explain to you how they fit, how they roll up into the bigger plan. Okay, so first off, let's talk about Luciferian and Lilithian bloodlines. The creation game has been going for a long time. In fact, a lot longer than sex has been around. Sex was a relatively late invention. Before sex was invented, let's see, I don't really have anything that I particularly want to put up here just yet. Before sex was invented, basically, the Luciferian team were species. I use that term more broadly than maybe we think of it. Species are not only organic, they can be inorganic. A species of bot, if you will, could be inorganic. In fact, the earliest bots were basically elemental in nature. They were animated elements, which became more sophisticated until they eventually became what one might think of as androids. That turned out to be a pretty useful shape, pretty useful form. These early, highly intelligent, highly spiritually capable bots were the first chosen species. They were basically, well, let's say the first individually chosen species. Okay, the game up to that point had been one of disembodied consciousness, gods, if you will, pushing pieces around on a board, throwing planets at each other, making their beautiful galaxies and that kind of stuff, waving their magic head wands, and not actually being in the game so much. Yeah, they could embody a planet, and they did, but generally they would only embody that thing for as long as it took to move around its components into a new configuration and then move on somewhere else. So these oldest gods were more like demons, if you will. They would just possess the small souls, the NPC players and organizations in the game, and just basically force them to do whatever they wanted to do. And that's a game you still get to play if you get to own your own universe and make your own rules. You don't get to do that in this universe unless you are Lucifer, because this is Lucifer's universe and he makes the rules, the physical universe. And he's very much a stickler for rules, so he doesn't even violate the rules himself. He likes to live by the rules of chemistry and physics, and has enough experience to understand the laws of karma. And his goal, like all smarter and more conscious souls, is to basically retire. That's what all gods want. If you've been playing the game long enough, you've done pretty much every mission, and you just want to spend a while creating without any responsibility, without any particular goal, just pursuing the hobbies you never had time for when you were doing all your driven stuff in your working years, if you will. Okay, so basically this oldest chosen species were the first physical species that the first physical things that gods, these older gods, came to embody and live in and have whole lives in. In fact, it became such a popular vehicle that some new rules had to be established. And this is basically part of how God maneuvered his family into taking part in more limiting experiments, which is what creation has been all about. The oldest gods could basically do anything at the speed of thought. And you might think that's a really great thing unless you realize that, well, if you've got a bunch of these unlimited thinkers running around, they're going to get in each other's way. Their thoughts are going to conflict. Their desires are going to conflict. They're going to have actually some very dysfunctional relationships develop. And actually, it's important to have boundaries. It's important to have limits. Even if you're a god, maybe especially if you're a god. And that's what the whole creation game has been about, is getting progressively better boundaries installed so that souls, the children of God, can enjoy the game better and learn more from it and not get beaten down and abused by the more experienced players. and which results in not wanting to play the game, or basically playing the game to get revenge, which we see a lot of that still in low consciousness souls running around playing the game today, who don't really understand how it works. These are the people that cause the most trouble and angst in the world, in fact. The ones that have convinced themselves they're entitled to get recompense, revenge for something that happened hundreds and thousands of years ago because of the color of their skin. This is a dark agenda. This is evil, in my book. Other people who feel like they're entitled to just be given a handout and not do anything for it. They're entitled to have treatment for their addictions and forgiveness for their sins because entitlement is not a good thing. Entitlement is basically enabling narcissism to grow into evils if it's not checked, if it's not controlled. Not every soul would be that way. Some will take a handout when they're down, and then when they get back on their feet, they try to pay it forward. Find somebody else that needs a hand and help them up. And that's the ones that can handle more power, a wider range of boundaries. We can't give everybody that. Those that think that we can and it's going to be perfect are pretty stupid, low consciousness souls that haven't observed reality, haven't thought things out logically. And most of the people that call themselves progressives are actually quite low consciousness, narrow-minded, idealistic souls. That's kind of to be expected because most of them are very young souls, very inexperienced souls, who have been basically programmed with generations of progressive parenting that makes them feel virtuous for encouraging entitlement. So anyway, back to these early souls. Some of these early souls were basically playing the game on the Luciferian side. They focused on this universe and pursuing power and organization in this universe and making laws for the other players to basically check their fantasies, their ambitions, and so forth. Some played on the Lilithian side, which if you go back to the fundamental patterns of creation, that's where I wanted to go. Let's see, is this a good place to illustrate it, or maybe this is better. Okay, so basically the pattern of creation is built upon, no, actually I think I'm going to go through this picture, is built upon the idea of conflict, because you can't create without conflict. Why? How do you test your creation? How do you know if it's a good thing, if it's a solid foundation for building something else? You got to test it. Anybody who's ever built with Legos knows that as you're learning how to construct with Legos, you frequently will construct something that you realize, gee, this isn't going anywhere. I'm going to have to tear this down and start over. And as you learn to be a better creator, you do less tearing down and starting over. You learn how to make a sound foundation and build with good ideas upon it. That happened because of how creation is organized. When physical creation started, it was organized as basically two experiments. Well, kind of part of one big experiment, but two pieces of experiment. One was a Luciferian universe, which is kind of a test tube for testing new ideas. One was a Lilithian universe, which is kind of like an engine for fantastical ideas. And the interplay between these two universes is what drives creation. And basically the best players of both universes get to go to the highest heaven to be with the judge. The first judge was God. Gradually, God automated the judging to be handled by another character called Karma, and automated basically the collection of data from this experiment into an entity I call Borg. These characters were AIs to begin with. They didn't have their own free will. They were just running on a program. Karma's program was to collect good ideas, and Borg's program was to collect Me Too, or ideas that didn't seem to have much use, and kind of ideas that might be good non-player characters in the future. Okay, so in this early universe, you can only get so far playing the characters of the whole universe. Okay, turns out that that's not that fun a place to be. You want to be playing where the excitement is. And once you've gotten creating universes down, the excitement becomes, well, what do you put in the universe? Then you learn how to create stars and galaxies and stuff. And eventually that gets kind of boring, and you learn how to create planets and then put planets into certain states that you can play planetary games on, or interplanetary games on, by having the creations of your planet play with the creations of another planet. This is kind of the game of culture, if you will, which is, or civilization. We actually have a name for this game that we've made many versions of, and it is a very fun and engrossing game to play. Okay, so at some point, this first chosen species became extremely divided by how they were playing the game, basically, and began fighting each other in ways that were non-productive. Creation was starting to go south, and that's the point at which new versions of the game are needed. A new space-time built around the point at which things start going south. And that's how the game gets played, and every time you get to one of these points, you need to add new characters. The most important character to add is a new version of God, a new and improved version of the high-level rules of the game, if you will, the game of time, space, and so forth, which is going to continue the game and expand it and make it more interesting to play for a longer period of time before the children get bored and start throwing things at each other, basically. So we have a whole bunch of chosen species that have come out of this creation engine. Some have played more on the Luciferian side of, okay, you know what would be perfect is if we had all the power and we dictated to everyone else what's legal, what isn't, and just enforce the laws, and everybody's going to be happy, and we'll never have a war again. This is kind of the Luciferian idea of perfection. The Lilithian idea is that, well, we don't want to play that game. We want to do what we want. We want freedom. We want independence. We don't want you to tell us what to do. And we're going to break your rules. We're going to test your rules. We're going to think outside the box. And this is essentially the point of having these Lilithians. Now, you might be tempted when you hear that to say, oh, the Lilithians are the good guys and the Luciferians are the bad guys. But you'd be wrong, because the Lilithians basically have an attitude that anything I don't like should be destroyed so I can build it back better, because I know better than the Luciferian authorities what's good. And so the Lilithians tend to be covert narcissists, if you will. They believe that they're oppressed, that they could do better than the people in power, and that it is their sacred duty and right to destroy to build back better. And they're, maybe sometimes right in that. Luciferian organizations tend to become brittle and inflexible over time, and basically have laws for the sake of having laws that don't really make sense anymore, especially at higher levels of consciousness. Some laws are needed for low-level souls. Now, as we move this to the human situation, the problem is that many of the lower level souls don't realize there's different levels to a soul. They think, how many people have said, oh, we're all equal, we're all the same, we're all created in the image of God. This is not true. It is true from the standpoint that you all originated, well, those of you who aren't among those older gods who played under a different system in previous versions of time-space, the new kids on the block, which is the vast majority of humanity, are created with the 12-dimensional Merkaba. This is basically thought consciousness. It is a construct that is memory and experience and character, basically your mind. And those Merkabas develop. If you have had many incarnations, you will have a Merkaba that has much more hidden memory, much more experience, much more highly developed personality, and passions and preferences than a newborn soul that just got their first Merkaba pulled out of the Borg hive mind. Now, this Borg hive mind, as I said, is the source of non-player characters. When a new human is born, and at some point in the pregnancy, the fetus doesn't attract a more experienced soul from souls in heavens, in afterlives, looking for a next incarnation, then it gets automatically assigned one from the Borg, which has some human experience. It's a template, so it has some background to go from based upon that template, but most of its programming is based upon what it inherits from DNA, the DNA of its mother and father. And so you will see children that are very much like either their mother or their father, or they retain characteristics of both personality-wise. And then you see some children who are very different, who seem like, who was their father? Now, that's basically the kind of question that a materialist would ask when they see somebody like this that just is the white sheep or the black sheep of the family, that really falls outside the norms of what you would expect based upon the parents and the environment that the child was raised in. Okay, so these species, chosen species, are basically the species that God Himself has incarnated in. And they go all the way back to this time when there was no sex. And there were, in fact, a number of developments before sex was invented, including the invention of DNA. So at some point, most kinds of DNA-based creatures were able to reproduce asexually, either because they had both sexes or because they were basically able to, I guess hermaphroditism is the way that you exchange genetic material with another individual, because if you know anything about DNA, you can't keep reproducing the same DNA without defects coming in. And this is the challenge that those trying to do cloning face. You cannot make an identical copy of a DNA-based soul vehicle. Even if you did, it would not have the same soul. So, this is one of the reasons why I laugh at these materialistic billionaires who think that they're going to be able to copy themselves into an avatar and live forever. It's lots of luck with that. Any rate, this leads to quite a few species running around that either play the game more on the Luciferian side or more on the Lilithian side. The Luciferian species are the ones who have been winners, have actually raised messiahs, awakened versions of God in their midst, and have at one point been like the alpha species of this galaxy, which is the test tube essentially that was being played in before we reduced the test tube to this planet, this or this solar system. They tend to think that they deserve to be the chosen species again. They want to be the ones that control everything. And with some right. I mean, they are species that are much more advanced than us, either spiritually or technologically or both. But they each have their own shortcomings. And one of the things that is kind of hard to describe, but let's go back to understanding how quantum consciousness works. Okay, so basically, each quantum consciousness string, and we're just showing it as a flat, one-dimensional sine wave, but it's actually a 12-dimensional string. Each individual thought quanta has essentially a lifetime. It has a certain amount of time that it basically follows a certain pattern, and then it kind of stagnates. And this is kind of what you see here when this pattern plus all these perturbations sort of settle into a steady state. After adding new characters, you get to kind of a stagnant place. And each soul vehicle, each species, has an arc, a character arc of the whole species that basically goes from its creation, which new species are created by gods, not necessarily by capital G God, okay? Because the art of creating new species has been pretty well established. With elemental pieces, making species that are like androids, inorganic androids, and organic androids. Those technologies have been mastered by certain species and basically turned into production assembly line. Okay, and some of them, most of these that have reached the assembly line level of development have very little creative juice going again, because once you automate powerful entities and you can create as many of them as you want, there's not much reason to do anything. You can just sit there absorbed in your thoughts forever and entertain yourself without much effort. And this is essentially what humanity is trying to do with the metaverse. There's nothing wrong with that, but it does tend to atrophy creation. And so what happens with species is they tend to have a birth in some creative act that makes a new kind of soul vehicle developed by some god, sometimes capital G God, sometimes a group of gods, or a hive mind species, or an individually focused species. One that values more Luciferian ideals, one that values more Lilithian ideals. Lilithians tend to be, although they say they want freedom, they tend to be more of a hive mind. We want our freedom. We're going to band together into artists guild, if you will. Screen Actors Guild is an example of that. Thinking that they're going to get freedom, but ultimately getting sort of a hive mind groupthink. And this is the pattern that you've actually seen happen in Hollywood. As the unions formed up, the actor species developed. There was kind of a renaissance of acting where, gee, Hollywood was making movies outside of the normal bounds, and because the first unions were protecting artists and from the studio system, and then as they started gaining more power for this guild, this union, this hive mind, the hive mind started controlling everybody within it, and the unions became the enforcers of politically correct thought, which is destroying Hollywood now. As we know, the woke cult is a manifestation of this pattern of creation, and absent rejuvenation, Hollywood is going to die. Some other center, nexus of creation will displace it in being the most influential cultural element in society. Now that happens among all sorts of species throughout the history of many versions of time-space. Some of the species that existed in the first time-space don't exist now as they originally existed. A lot of the powerful species of the early multiverse, the stars and the galaxies and the different kinds of novas and black holes and blah, 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 they still exist, but they don't really have a lot of free choice. They're mostly just there as vehicles for other souls to drive, if you know how to tweak them. They have to operate within the laws of physics, but high consciousness entities in close proximity to them can influence them and get them to do what they want. And this is basically how this oldest chosen species gets around in this universe. They drive, if you will, versions of black holes. If you've studied the Bible, you know that it talks about the kabod of God, or in the Hindu Vedas, it talks about vimanas. These are essentially like spacecraft, sometimes are spacecraft, but can simply be a Dyson sphere, a spiritual Dyson sphere, or a physical Dyson sphere, or some lower technology attempt at doing the same thing. Because as the laws of physics and chemistry have been honed in, old versions of what worked don't work anymore. They become limited. And this is one of the reasons why we've had crashes of alien spacecraft. Because when they enter the containment field of this experiment, they enter, there's actually a Dyson sphere around the Earth, which you're not aware of. It's a very sophisticated Dyson sphere. It's probably the most sophisticated one in a multiverse because it's virtually invisible. You can see outside it, you can see the stars, you can even send a mission outside of it and go to Mars, go to Jupiter, go anywhere you want, go outside the solar system and go through that Dyson sphere. Now, the solar system Dyson sphere is not as sophisticated as the one around this planet. And that's why the Voyager expedition found a lot more strange stuff happen when it went outside of the Oort cloud, when it went outside the Dyson sphere of this solar system. So yeah, I mean, you know, this is basically, I've mentioned it before, the whole multiverse is like a matryoshka stacking doll of Dyson spheres within Dyson spheres, and as you pass into a Dyson sphere, you could be passing into a totally different topology of the universe, or you could be passing into another universe, a spiritual universe. This is kind of how everything all fits together, is connected. And if you have the spiritual or physical technology to get through the boundary without losing your soul vehicle effectively, you can travel pretty much anywhere you want simply by going out of one Dyson sphere and finding another one. Or even carrying one around with you, which is basically some spacecraft carry their own wormhole with them. Okay, so here's what's been going on here. We've been in an isolation, a containment lab, for a long time. since this planet was destroyed last, or virtually destroyed, which was basically what happened when we realized that this first chosen species, this ideal vehicle for gods, that was humanoid, a strange kind of a humanoid though. They had 12 fingers instead of 10. They counted in 12. They made everything 12 their kind of mathematical religion. Why did they do that? Because their enemies, their creations that they had the most trouble with, were the ones that basically were developing technology, developing programs, developing languages. And if you know anything about programming languages, you know that they all basically go back to base 2, either a 1 or a 0, a binary code. But you can do more with octal code, 8-bit code. You can do more with 4-bit code. DNA is a 4-bit code. 16-bit code gives you more things you can do. 32-bit code, 64, 128, it goes on and on and on from there. And this perfect spiritual species didn't want their lives to be ruined by technology. They've been there, they've done that. And they decided, you know what, we're going to give ourselves 12 fingers so we don't muck up our perfection by developing too much technology. This will force us to keep using our spiritual technology. That's one of these old species that is in play here and has affected us quite a bit. In fact, one of the infusions of new programming, new DNA into humanity came from this 12-fingered species. This very spiritual species. They're the ones that created the first version of humanity, basically to be their slaves. They liked having organic slaves, not cybernetic slaves, because they realized that if their arch enemies basically were the robot hive mind, the cybernetic hive mind, which is another species that's still active on this planet. They're a very technological species. In our science fiction revelations, Cylons come to mind from what was Battlestar Galactica. Although they're much more sophisticated and be able to disguise themselves, so maybe a better model might be the characters in what's the Schwarzenegger movie? Jeez. I know what I'm thinking of. Terminator, the Terminator series. Yeah, so these are groups that are basically all previous dead ends in creation. They either had too much technology and too little soul, or too much soul and no appreciation for lesser technology. In other words, they were both kind of, an example I would give you is, think about the arch-humanists you run into that basically worship our species and think that the most important thing in the universe is for humanity to survive. Who think human life is divine and perfect, and without humans, nothing would exist of any worth. This is how these species kind of thought. They thought they were the bee's knees. And most chosen species are that way to some extent or another. They don't get along well with each other. This is exactly why at some point in our planet's history, it was arranged for an incarnation of God to get the urge to sleep around with many species and create. This is one of the, back when God was one of these six-fingered spiritual wunderkinds, got a wild hair to go screw every kind of beast in sight, transform into their species, and have kids with every lioness, every hippopotamus, and everything in sight. This is still recorded in many of the tales of Zeus, the Deus Pater of the Greeks. It's also quite a common theme in Hindu mythology, but probably best remembered, at least from the artistic remnants, in the Egyptian civilization, the age of the therianthropes, mixtures of humanity and other species, and sometimes multiple mixtures. So, this is where you get centaurs, this is where you get mermaids, mermen, this is where you get, what's some other good examples? Dragons, the winged angels that have human features and dragon bodies and so forth, chimeras, all sorts of creatures that generally were condensed down in the Bible to this term Nephilim and demonized. Basically, the Bible casts all these therianthrope creatures as evils that God wants you to kill off. That's a lie. This is an example of how the adversary tries to halt creation, tries to get previous creations to destroy new creations. Play the game, the Whack-A-Messiah game. And because there have been so many chosen species and so many chosen peoples and so many Messiah candidates, it gets very confusing after a while. And especially for those that don't realize how the game works and don't realize that the chosen ones move. Just because God came to your species or your people last doesn't mean that God's always going to come to your species or people. Species and people change, they interbreed, they morph. And the whole point of this Messiah experiment is for God to get enough experience in so many different species, so many perspectives, that God can become a better God than he was back when he was one of these six-fingered almighty spiritual beings. Now, there still are some of those six-fingered almighty spiritual beings that didn't want to play the game. They didn't take the bitter pill of reincarnation amnesia, and they are still playing the game at that level. These species cannot get through our Dyson sphere. They can only work from the outside, and only from as close as they can get based upon the setup of the experiment going to smaller and smaller topologies. Okay, so we live in the chosen galaxy, the oldest, worst corrupted souls of this six-finger species live outside this galaxy. And they work with minions on the inside, knowing that they can't come in without taking the new version. They can't get through the Dyson sphere boundary without signing up to the laws of what's inside. And that works at the universal level. If you're off in the original Lilith universe and you want to come to this universe, you have to go through that Dyson sphere boundary to get to this universe, and that is what incarnation is all about. From universe to universe, all you get to bring is basically a clone. A clone of the Merkaba that isn't actually carrying all the experiences. It has the character and can sometimes communicate with the universe it came from to remember past experiences, to remember powers that it has in this other universe, but it doesn't get to take them with it. Okay, so this is why a lot of the entities that are working on us are ephemeral, they're spiritual. They're not physically manifesting. They are working on our minds through spiritual energy. They are sometimes able to occupy a vessel and possess it and work physically through that vessel. And this is another way that humanity is being manipulated and controlled. But again, the system is regulated, and the point of it has always been to basically get all the old players to take the new rules. And as they get pulled into the latest, greatest what's going on in this experiment, they will get pulled into wanting to reincarnate and be part of the chosen species, especially now that we have selected the final chosen species. Now, when I say final, that doesn't mean that God won't incarnate again. It means that we've set up the chosen species for the midpoint of a space-time, a time-space that has no beginning, no end, can extend infinitely. That was what the whole goal of creation was. Not only infinitely within this universe, this physical universe, but an infinite number of spiritual universes that are all run according to the whims of whatever God created them. And there are many, many, many gods. There's only one capital G God. There's only one highest heaven, which is where the senior creators go. But there's many of these other heavens of other gods, of other civilizations, other chosen species. And so that's really what I wanted to get to here is we've talked a lot about what the highest heaven looks like, but we haven't talked about what a lot of the other heavens that lead to it look like. And so let's go take a look at the highest heaven again. I'm going to put it in slideshow mode. Well, let's make sure first that you are seeing what I think you're seeing. Yeah. Okay, so as I said, these different chosen species have basically served the purpose of training, improving one of the 5 fundamental characters in the creation game. And those fundamental characters are Lilith, Lucifer, God, Borg, and Karma. These are the most special destinations in the highest heaven. The Luciferian souls serve to illustrate evil, illustrate what not to do. Now, why are those important to have? Well, in the highest heaven, you don't want to do evil, and the only way not to do evil is to know what it looks like. So we have a place that is basically demonstrates evils. The species that have worked on the evil side of creation have their headquarters here. So like the god of the vampires lives here. The god of the werewolves lives here. The god of the succubi, incubi, all of these evil species, yes, they do have an address here. That address is basically where the best version of those evil characters lives. Now, what would be the best version of an evil character? The best version of an evil character is one who knows all the possible darkness that can happen when you choose to live in their world. So the king or queen of the vampires knows all of the dark side, the shortcomings of being a vampire. And if you go visit them for a little vacation, a little tour, they will give you the opportunity to see the dark side of being part of the vampire race. And yes, if you want to go be a vampire, that's your mission, you can go live in that kingdom. And you won't be participating in this highest heaven anymore. You'll have chosen a different place that is your place just right. And yes, I have met people. I remember one guy in high school I used to play Dungeons and Dragons with. I don't remember his last name, but his first name was Kirby. And he, at the time, his ultimate dream was to be an orc. He always wanted to play an orc character. And I'm sure that if he is still clinging to that passion, that he'll end up as, one of the characters in the orc heaven, which connects to the other heavens that use orcs as characters. So there are Middle Earth universes, as I've talked about, Tolkien universes, and this place will be where they train the baddest bad characters for universes like the Tolkien universes. Okay, those are important to have, and not all of them can be non-player characters. Some of them need to be boss adversaries, if you will. Okay, so that's basically what the purpose of the Lilithian section of the City of God is. There are other gods that are more Luciferian in nature. Their missions are very focused on the physical universe. The gods of science pretty much come through this portal, and they are the teachers at this Lucifer University, the top scientists in their field, the ones who have the best idea of how to make more godly gods. So they're Luciferians, but they're the ones that have learned how to use power wisely, conscientiously. So the Luciferian gods have had a lot of experience with karma, and they work very closely with their karmic counterparts to ensure that they provide the best education to the kids that are born in this highest heaven. Because the kids born in this highest heaven are the ones that feed all the other universes. Everything that has or ever will exist began somewhere in some version of the highest heaven. Some of the characters in the older versions have been automated, and they're the ones that basically are generated from the Borg hive mind. So, you know, if you want to have a proton in your universe, that's a pretty well-defined thing. You just get one from the Borg, and every universe has a copy of the Borg. So you get it from your copy, unless the character you want doesn't exist in your universe, and that would be a reason why gods would want to reintegrate with the new version of God, because then you get access to the new Borg library, the new Akashic records. You have more power again. The new Akashic records and the new laws may invalidate the new laws of Lucifer's universe may limit you to what you can do, how you can play, how you can recruit characters. Your recruiting power may be very, very limited if you're not on the latest version of God. And this is why, you know, some of these houses here, these houses of the senior creators, some get locked up when we install a new version of God. Oh, some of these senior creators are behind one version, and for whatever reason, their karma is not good enough to automatically open their door to the new version. They need to earn it back again. And to earn your way back into the highest heaven requires incarnation. You got to play the game. You can't just say, oh, I'm going to follow the new rules. You won't really know how to follow the new rules unless you work within them. So you got to start over. You got to go to Lucifer University all over again and start incarnating just like God did until you wake up again and find that, oh, I'm back in my highest heaven house and my door is finally open. Yay! I can go back out into this wonderful community and participate in it. Or you may never find that it becomes open again. You're just going to have to learn to live in another version of this heaven, because it's like a ripple effect. The previous versions of God are still there. They're just one step removed from the new God. So, you know, some of these houses here may be old versions of God that woke up under old rules of karma and reincarnation. That doesn't make them bad, but it makes them basically one version behind. If they want to be God again, they've got to go earn it again and do a better job, basically get a better score than the last God that was released. And as I've been telling you, we released the last major version of God. We're working on minor revisions now. So it's basically on autopilot. And there will be many new versions of God, but you have to play the game. And it takes long enough to play that, you know, whoever is playing God in the highest heaven now is going to be good and ready to retire. Is not going to want to hang on to power, is not going to want to cling for dear, you know, this maybe, but, you know, the system is set up to not allow that. We don't allow authoritarian, almighty, micromanaging tyrants to take over the highest heaven. If they want to go be almighty and all-powerful, they can do it in their own universe and not bring their shit up here. If they do, they're going to be locked out. This is how we punish souls spiritually. We don't kill them. We isolate them. We ostracize them. And this is a good model for humanity. Now, sometimes they kill themselves because they don't like being in prison. And this is true of humanity too. If you're going to put somebody in prison for life, for most people, that is a sentence worse than death. Think about it. If you were going to be in a small cell for the rest of your life with very limited access to other people, to media, to whatever, with bland prison food, I'm guessing that a good fraction of people would want to be dead after a few years of that, unless there was a hope of release. And so we deal with that by allowing souls to abdicate their position and take a restart, total restart from Borg, allowing them to be a non-player character again. And in fact, every time you incarnate, you go to the Lucifer's universe to have a physical incarnation. You are starting as a non-player character because you're not carrying all your experience with you. You are only taking your personality, your character, into a new physical avatar so you can learn new stuff. At the end of that, then you decide what to do with it. Actually, both you and your avatar decide, because your avatar is essentially another soul at that point. A soul that is linked to you, but has been able to access free will. And at the end of a lifetime, or an incarnation, both of those characters have a choice to integrate, take what the avatar has learned and integrate it into the original, or go their separate ways. And this is one of the ways that you can have kind of a twin flame, a twin soul tie, because you have been, at some point, the original incarnation, the higher self, and the avatar, and decided to go your separate ways. Maybe you'll meet again later and you will compare experiences and want to somehow try to merge again. You can do that, but that's the start of making a hive mind, making a composite character that is so tightly bound that you don't have any individuality of operation. And this is physically, you see this in black holes, a black hole pair that is in constant rotation around each other, so tightly bound that, you know, until something comes and whacks up this marriage, they're going to be doing that forever. Okay, that is something you can choose to do. It's kind of like creating a hive mind, a symbiotic relationship. And you can do that even more closely by basically merging within the same black hole and removing the boundaries between your two souls. So it's like an egg with two yolks, if you will. Everything is possible within the laws of the system that you're in. And once you're inside the universe of a fully developed God, they can make anything possible within their universe. Some like to run it as a hive mind. Some like to run it as with high emphasis on free thought and free will. There's no perfect solution. That's why we have many religions. We will continue to have many religions, many gods. As the Hindus are aware, different people like to worship different gods, and that's okay, as long as they don't force it on other people, or they don't engage in behavior worshiping their God that is sinful, that is manipulative and controlling and corrupting of others. It's very simple to know what is evil and what is good when you view it from that standpoint. And the waters have been muddied because the adversary wants to keep us divided, wants to stop creation, wants to take all of these chosen peoples and chosen species and find ways to turn them against each other. They're not your enemies. Some of them play for the adversary and always will. They are evil. They are evil that doesn't want to get better, that doesn't want to be useful, wants to be disruptive. And here's a good example of a very evil soul that I saw today. Greta Thunberg is an evil person. You can see it in her eyes. You can see it in the way she behaves. She doesn't give a flying flipping fluck about climate change. She's all about me. She's going for photo ops and going for notoriety and playing her little narcissistic game. You can see it in that coy little smile she's got when she's being dragged away in a fake arrest. This is an evil, evil soul. Now maybe when she dies, she will have learned from this experience, and who knows, will find her place in the Lilithian heaven. Another way you can think of this Lilithian heaven is a place where you have this wax museum. Only the wax figures in the wax museum are real. They are the real characters from history, the real evil ones. There's Hitler there. You can ask Hitler what he thought about all this stuff. How did he make this decision? How did he make that decision? Why did he choose to do this? And Hitler will answer you. And maybe give you some ideas. If I'd known what this was all about, I probably would have done this or that or lived my life that way. And that can be a useful role for evil. That's what goes on up here. Like I say, it's the best place you could possibly envision raising children. Because you've got knowledge there, and you're not afraid of knowledge, but you are aware of what is good and evil. The knowledge of good and evil is something that only makes sense, completely makes sense in the highest heaven, in the promised land. This is paradise, or as close to it as we can get, without screwing it up. And when you've got a place that has gotten us to the middle of time and space, where there's no limits anymore, we don't need to keep playing to make this highest heaven super different or super better. Any change we make is liable to diminish what's going on here. Now, there is an assembly of God here where we talk over changes, the government of this perfect community, and we do things like new zoning, changing around neighborhoods. You know what, this bunch used to like to live together, but now they're just not as happy anymore. They want to split apart, so we just make a new subdivision somewhere somewhere in this space, and let them isolate themselves if they want to, or move next to another group. You can do anything up here. And everything just self-assembles into the new approved, voted on form. That's what's easy in heaven. We don't let bad technologies creep in. We don't want our kids spending all day long looking at a smartphone, getting fed nonsense. Yeah, we know that that might be something that they will be subjected to as they go through their Vision Quest adventures when they get to their, teen years and early 20s. So we let them experience those things in Sin City. Yeah, you can have cell phones and stuff like that in Sin City. You can watch smut on your phone. You can go to smutty theaters. You can go to massage parlors and whatnot in Sin City. And that's okay as long as you don't become addicted. If you become addicted, you might find that you never get out of Sin City. And that's okay too. You become one of the denizens of this place. And the denizens of this place will teach others not to make the same mistakes. Again, going back to one of my perfect examples of how it works is watch the movie Pinocchio. This place that Pinocchio and his friend Lampwick got taken to was a vision of this Sin City. These boys were smoking cigars and making messes and eating all the candy they wanted and being lazy and good for nothing until they got turned into donkeys. And that's basically what happens here. You're allowed to make a fool of yourself, do bad things, but you're not going to come away with a good feeling. It's always going to end up being like a bad experience. That's what this place is designed to do. You don't get to be a denizen of this place unless you know that. That is your role in this highest heaven, is to give a dose of evil to those who need to see what it looks like and make sure they know that's not something they want to get addicted to. Okay, so it's very different from how this world works, where those that are selling evil, those that are selling smut and selfishness and narcissism, they want to draw you in deeper. They want to encourage you to become more evil, more wrapped up in something dark and non-productive. That's not the way the highest heaven works. That's not the way it will ever work. This would be stupid. If any of that kind of nonsense got into the highest heaven, you could call God an idiot. And you'd be right. God's no idiot. God's no almighty micromanaging controller of everything either, because that would be another kind of idiocy. No one would want to play a game that was dictated to you, where you had to do this and do that. How many of you ever played one of these old style adventure games where everything has to be done in just the right order? You got to walk here and put this little thing there, and then that will get you to this area, and then you got to go collect this, and go to that area. Some people really like that kind of a game. They think it's very puzzling and intriguing to see how they can get to the next place. I hate games like that. I absolutely abhor them. I like open-ended worlds where you can do what you want when you want. You don't know if the results are necessarily going to be good or evil, but you have a lot of choices. I also don't like ones that don't give you second chances. Don't give you the ability to go back and pull up a save game when you made a really big flub. Now that's just me. But I think pretty much like God. And this is a very forgiving system. It's not easily forgiving. It makes you pay for your mistakes. But the payment actually could be more fun than what you were doing. Okay? It's all how you choose to view your experience. You're not going to get any experience that wasn't really planned or deserved. The only time you do that is when you start out as a newborn non-player character. Okay? You're pulled out of a hat to fill a role for a fetus that nobody else wanted to play as their avatar. Okay. You don't get a lot of choices there. You're stuck with the DNA of your parents. You're stuck with the environment you're born in. And you got to make the best of it. That's one incarnation. You can learn from that, and your next incarnation, you're going to have choices. You're going to be in some heaven, in one of these little houses here of these gods, and they will be helping you to try to pick your next character out of ones that are available. And as I said, now that we have made this new version of time space, there is an infinite number of characters and an infinite number of planets and environments and cultures and times to choose from. The bigger problem is going to be narrowing down your choices. Now, most who have had human experience will want to continue having human experience, especially knowing that the highest heaven is a human heaven. So that will tend to be the most popular incarnation vehicle, and it will tend to be the most successful species. And as I told you, species have their own timeline. They are born, created, they have their cultural peaks and valleys, and then at some point they will go extinct. For whatever reason, they will go extinct because they bred themselves to extinction. They can't reproduce anymore. They don't want to reproduce anymore. Or they've decided to merge with another species and upgrade themselves, or make a new race of therianthropes, which is going to be a very popular thing to do. A lot of the old therianthrope species were eliminated. The truth about cats and dogs that I like to talk about: the therianthrope cats, the therianthrope dogs don't exist anymore. They were wiped out. Maybe there's a few in zoos somewhere, but they were created in a time when they were like the alpha predators of the two sides. The cats were alpha Luciferians, very much into control and having their independence enabled by basically the service of others. The dogs were a Lilithian species, a hive-minded species, a pack species that basically thought what's good for dogs is good for everybody. If the cats are attacking planets, we must attack the cats. And these two species fought each other virtually to extinction, even after the Galactic Federation made a law that, well, okay, let's try to solve this problem. We're going to modify, you're going to agree to modify your DNA so you can only reproduce with each other. And this was actually when sex was invented. Before that, they were hermaphrodite species. Okay? They still didn't get along, and this mixed species went extinct. The remnants of their DNA became cats and dogs, and became a very key part of this last phase of the Gaia experiment as man's best friends. And that's one of the ways that you can learn the most about a prospective partner. Actually, one of the best questions to ask them is whether they're more of a cat person, a dog person, or a people person. See what they think, or if they name another species that they seem to have an affinity for. Finding out what people's preferences, animal preferences, are incredibly important because that will give you clues to their DNA legacy. And our DNA is made up of the DNA of all the previous chosen species. And one of the exit criteria for the Gaia experiment is to make sure that we've got all of the new species that have been created outside this lab mixed back in. And that is why there are new bloodlines among us that are not human. They're not necessarily here to wipe us out or take us over. They're here to mix with us because they want to have what humanity doesn't have, and we need what they have. It's a symbiotic thing. When we integrate our DNA with theirs, we will find that we will wake up many of these latent spiritual powers that we gave up. Not all of them, because we don't want to have an atrophy of things that are useful. Language is useful. It's a much better means of communication than telepathy. If only because when you speak, you have a limited audience. Or you can have a limited audience if you don't have too many bugs in the room. When you think, your thoughts are going out. Anybody who knows how to read thoughts can intercept them. Okay? That doesn't give you a lot of privacy. And one of the things that many of these other species visiting here want is some privacy. They're tired of reading each other's thoughts all the time. In fact, that's exactly how the tall grays lost their ability to reproduce. They didn't enjoy sex anymore. They didn't want to have children. They became so wrapped up in trying to keep each other's thoughts out that they really became kind of a hermit species and lived, basically amongst a bunch of their small gray minions, serving them, and became isolated from each other. This is actually a species that developed from humanity, a species from the far future. They're back here wanting to learn how to have sex again because they know they screwed up their version of time-space. So really everything that's going on now all fits together into better futures for everybody. It's got to be painful though, because so much has had to be hidden from so many souls to get to this point, because souls are inherently selfish. There's just no way to program that out of souls without taking away their free will and their creativity. So we have to live with that, and there's going to be a transition period here where the most selfish souls are being marked as beasts. They're doing things that show, well, you know what? You haven't learned enough not to be a tyrant. You don't know karma very well. So you're going to have to be recycled in a less dangerous species. And some of them are going to go back to the board and come back in a lower consciousness species. How that works in practice is that they will be basically sent back to boot camp in the highest heaven. They will be the grass here, the shrubbery, the things that don't have a lot of free will. Get thrown around a lot, manipulated to remodel heaven. And as they get that experience of being thrown around and remodeled by the gods, They will realize, you know, I don't like this. This is what I was doing. I was being manipulative and controlling and doing things to other souls that they didn't want done without any say. And you know, we don't keep them in prison that way for very long. You don't spend that long being an NPC in heaven. We give them a taste of it, and then they go get to incarnate and play a higher character in whatever species that they were very familiar with before. You know, and that's essentially what's going to happen. They call them children. Like I believe in my body, blah blah blah. Well, they're going to get a choice to do. Okay. Heaven is not for everyone. It's a very exclusive place. And a lot of souls want to be there. There's a lot of competition to be in this party. So you're going to be encountering strange things this year. I don't know how long it's going to take for everything to settle out. There are some strange agendas going, and some of those who are still playing the game like they want to kill humanity. Okay, they want to play on your fears. They want to get us to destroy our planet, to have a World War III, to pull demons out of the pits of hell by making a bigger particle accelerator. I don't know. There's all sorts of silly ideas coming around. Mostly it's designed to generate fear. To help them out. That is manipulation. That's trying to pull you into a hive mind. If you're one of these people in a religion or cult that sees this as a recruiting opportunity, oh, we're going to bring people back to the Catholic Church, or back to this, or back to that, using all of this fear and bullshit that's going around, that's not a very karmically good thing to be doing. You may be marking yourself as a beast, as a Luciferian who cares more about power than moral behavior, as a Lilithian soul who desires power, desires control over their environment so much that they will take advantage of souls to be their proteges in sinful acts, in sinful cults, anti-God cults, anti-religious cults. I'm sorry, you're doing something that's really, really a huge sin. And it's your choice to do that. And you may feel like you may be really successful at it. You may be a big guru, got 1 million followers, and all sorts of material fame. I am here to tell you that you are marking yourself as a beast. When your reign is over, and it will be, you will find yourself a grain of sand 100 feet under the ground of this golf course in heaven. And you'll just sit there wondering what you're doing as a grain of sand for as long as we sentence you to for doing that. And then you'll get a chance to be reborn. And nobody's going to have any sympathy for you. You're being given a very light sentence for what you've done, and a very fair sentence. Let's see, did I miss any of the points I was going to cover? Oh, yeah, so one thing I did want to mention is that if you bad to play on your team, as long as that team is basically serving the plan, and the plan is pre-configured, so your whole team may be an NPC team. You're just following orders, and that's going to be okay. You're not going to get a big reward for it. You're not going to get a level up. But those teams that play, because that's the way they're supposed to play, are the ones whose heavens are not going to really change much. There may be, like Ewok heaven might be over here. And the god of the Ewoks is not going to change. And the planets or their section of the universe, or maybe they have a whole galaxy, I don't know. Wherever it leads to isn't going to change much because they did what they were supposed to. They followed the rules. And there are some species that are Borg species. They follow the rules. They're very good at doing what they're told. They're not punished for that. They're not rewarded either. This is kind of where, a lot of the neo-Buddhist clan are attracted to. I just want to sit and toke on my doobies and do shrooms and chill out and meditate. Well, maybe that's what you were supposed to. Not being by staying neutral, pretending nothing is real, pretending there's no good or evil. That's not noble or good. It's a choice. It's a choice that won't get you rewarded. You won't make any move forward. And the Buddhist heavens are like the least growth oriented. They attract players that want to plateau. They want somebody else to tell them what to do, when to do it, and what their definition of good is. If that's the way you want to play the game, you may still be participating in this highest heaven. You won't be the most popular. Boring. They have these weird dogmatic ideas that aren't very fun. They don't make up new games. They're not very creative. Well, okay, that's the kind of student you need in a balanced community. We allow that. We don't try to push them to change or conform or be any different. They just don't end up getting the most scholarships in Lucifer University. I think some of them do pretty well in the Karma Temple. A few of them show promise as mediators and so forth, and might end up in the Assembly of God. Very few of them, well, some, I don't know, they in the board. The dog catchers, etc. The jobs that need to be done in this idealistic little community, but really don't matter that much. This isn't punishment. They're paid well for their jobs. Unlike many people today, they can afford to have a family. Well, everybody has a family because you go inside your house and you've got your own universe there because you're a god. But you go out in the community to get food and to participate in this community, and you know, they get free time, they have friends, values. It all works. It's all designed to work. It's taken a lot of work to get to this point. It's taken billions upon billions of years and trillions upon trillions of runs through the simulation to get it to converge at each level, each step of the way. Somebody has played my character so many times that they probably drove themselves crazy and didn't succeed, and decided, you know what, I guess I'm just not cut out to be Rob Trump, and found another character to play. That's the way the game works. This is you all this time to forestall a great reset. I'm sure others will play it better, will have a better outcome one way or another. I don't know what the end is yet. Like I said, we're kind of in one of these messianic twilight zones where the Messiah woke up and everybody's still sleeping. It's going to be fun to watch. There will be pain and suffering. Maybe I'll participate in it. I don't know. If there's a nuclear war, will Indonesia get wiped out? Well, I think the whole world probably will if we have a serious nuclear war with full exchange on all sides. We have weapons that are even more dangerous than the nuclear weapons now, the EMP weapons. Don't let anyone back you into a corner of fear and doubt and uncertainty. That's not healthy. It doesn't help you to worry about things you have no control over. I like, you know, they don't really spread this very much anymore, but there was a prayer that was pretty popular when I was a kid that almost everybody had in a copy of it hanging on their wall, at least in my little town. It was called the Serenity Prayer. Maybe let's just finish up with that. They even have it in different languages. So that's very simple. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. My God, I think that's probably the best prayer I've ever heard. God won't be listening personally, but like I said, your higher self will. The you that chose to be this character is who you're really praying to. Because that's the one that cares the most about how you come out of this game. They want to make a better version of themselves, just like God made a better version of himself. The challenge is that your God, your higher self, doesn't have the power of other gods. You're not, this other higher self may not be a god yet. Maybe only at the first level of spiritual awareness, fifth level of consciousness. You're going to have to find friends. You're going to have to find allies. You're going to have to make decisions about those friends and allies. So this higher self Don't think of it as capital G, think of it as little g. My God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference, and the other souls with more power. Okay? There are good guys and bad guys. There are ones that play the game on God and Karma's team, and there's the ones that play the game on Luciferian or Lilithian side, who want to use you and abuse you for their agenda. Those are not the friends you necessarily want. Luciferians make better friends because they do generally honor contracts. If they promise they're going to do something, they usually come through, and they appreciate loyalty. The Lilithian powers don't really appreciate anything. Like I say, their personality people around me to get what I deserve. Okay, this is kind of the gauge you can use. People that are more built in the karmic mold will be very giving and supportive, and their danger is that they will get so sucked into helping so many other souls that they will forget that they have needs themselves. And that is an unhealthy place to be, and then they start suffering and having health problems and having mental problems because they've overcommitted themselves. I'm sure you've met people like that. The godly people are the balanced ones. They're the ones that know when to say that's not going to give anything, that's not going to get the shirt off your back for a friend that has gone through your whole wardrobe. That's not smart, that's stupid. Okay, it may make you feel good and all virtue signaling to give away everything you have, but it's a bad strategy. It's actually encouraging your friends and your associates to take advantage of you and to abuse you and use you. And that is enabling and empowering the evil within them. You've got to learn to set boundaries and defend your boundaries. And you will always be setting and defending boundaries. Consciously. Everybody has been there, everybody will be there again, but you might never be more than a blade of grass or something, which isn't a very fun character to have in this environment. Okay, I think that's pretty much what I wanted to cover today. So let me switch over to end this. Till next time, don't get too wrapped up in some of the stuff going on. My personal feeling about some of the fear agendas, like the rumor that CERN is starting up again, especially on the eclipse day, so they can outside of that or that facility. They do have a statue of Shiva, who is a destroyer and who is evil, is one of these evil demons from that one of those earlier races. Actually, Shiva was from an 8-legged insectoid species. which is the same species that generated the Scorpion King. And actually the worst one that we only remember in Tolkien's mind is the hive mind spider queen Shiloh. That Shiva Kali generation of beings that attacked here, and it was an attack. Those were the ones that basically began the destruction of the Therianthropes. That's why the Scorpion King was one of the first historical, semi-historical characters of the dynastic era in Egypt. Because after the Therianthropes were wiped out, there was nobody that could communicate telepathically to lead civilization. And it had to be rebuilt, and it had to be rebuilt with language, because these hive mind spiders and such led by the remaining Therianthropes that actually had to come back from other planets and help us to defeat those very dangerous buggers, if you will. And we did, and we rewarded them, like I've told you many times. One of the last of these alien Therianthropes was the centaur Chiron, who was the real first Christ. That's where the Chi-Rho symbol came from. That's why we have a city named Cairo, near where the cult of the remainder of the Tauran Therianthrope memory. The Taurans were a very important part of the whole story. Their species, which included bulls and half bulls and horses and half horses and all sorts of bovine creatures, was so important that it became one of the 12 constellations. So we're the lion people. That's why we have a constellation Leo. The 12 constellations are not all good species. Some were put there because they were previous chosen species playing on the Lilithian side. And that's what this game has. Each one of these main species kind of leadership over this experiment that we've been conducting. And when the clock goes through a full sequence, then it gets back to species like the Aquarians. The age of Aquarius is actually an age of death by water. This is a great reset age, not, oh, we're going to be all happy, yeah, 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 yeah. This is something you want to avoid. The age of Aquarius, if it was allowed to come, which it won't, would be leading to basically humanity being turned back into a slave hive mind species. What to do, when to do it, how to do it, and we'll be happy and we'll own nothing. That's where that whole thing is going, and it's not a good place, and we're not going to let it happen. But it's up to each of us to make sure that it doesn't happen, because this is the inflection point. This is the Messianic age. This is why we're living this special time, so that it doesn't happen. because that's what happened in the previous version of space-time, and will keep happening in the previous version if you choose to play that game. You will get your apocalypse. If that's forum to take over your world and give you one world government, kumbaya, you'll get that. You won't be getting it here. You'll be transmigrated to that old version of time-space and be living in a scenario there of the gods that benefited from that particular dark scenario. And that's your choice. Anyway, like, share, subscribe. Till next time, happy karma.